Hello, and welcome to Yankee Land Sports Network, New England's premier sports talk show, and our special episode covering the week of October the 12th to October the 20th, with live commentary from Mexico City, Mexico, in the Olympic Village of the 19th Olympiad. We have a packed schedule, so let's get right to the scores around the leagues. First, in the English First Division, West Ham United had a record-setting day on the 19th, as Jeff Hurst put up 6 goals against Sunderland, who the Hammers thrashed with a final score of 8-0. Raul Acklin of The Observer commented cheekily on the result, that, quote, Hurst was allowed to keep the match ball as a memento, which was only proper since he had it for most of the afternoon. Elsewhere in the league, Burnley beat Leeds United by a score of 5-1, who were the last unbeaten team in the top flight of English football. In American football, the Boston Patriots lost to the Houston Oilers 16-0, and the Buffalo Bills fired head coach Joe Collier after only 2 games. In the NHL, who began their season a week ago, the Boston Bruins are off to a hot start. In particular, their captains Bobby Orr and alternate captain Phil Esposito, each with 5 points through 2 games. The NBA season started recently as well, with your Boston Celtics, led by Bill Russell and John Havlicek, attempting to defend their crown as NBA champions. They won their season opener at the Garden against the Detroit Pistons by a final score of 106-88. The 65th World Series wrapped up a few days ago as well, with the Detroit Tigers beating the St. Louis Cardinals in 7 games to wrap up their 1968 Major League Baseball season. And now, onto our main story, brought to you by Pepsi. Taste that beats the others cold, Pepsi pours it on. Enjoy Pepsi today. The 19th Olympiad is underway in Mexico City, as the world's best athletes have all converged to the Mecca of Latin America to represent their countries in the quest for gold. There are many notable quirks about this Olympiad, so let's get them out there for contextual purposes. First, this is the first ever Olympiad hosted in Latin America. What makes Mexico City such an intriguing location for the Olympiad is the elevation, as it sits over 7,300 feet above sea level, meaning the air is much thinner than most of the athletes have been practicing in. East and West Germany will be competing separately as well for the first time. Next, let's do a quick review of how the states have done so far at the Games. 19-year-old George Foreman of Marshall, Texas, defeated Soviet heavyweight boxer Ioannis Sepoulis in only 2 rounds to claim gold. Al Oerter of Queens, New York, won his 4th consecutive gold in discus, only the 2nd athlete to do this in any individual event. 16-year-old Debbie Meyer of Sacramento, California, became the first Olympian to win 3 individual gold medals in one Olympics in the 200, 400, and 800-meter freestyle swimming events. The United States is on pace to earn over 100 medals, in part thanks to the performances of Tommie Smith and John Carlos in the 200-meter race, which also happens to be our main story from the Estadio Olímpico Universitario. Americans Tommie Smith and John Carlos finished the 200-meter race as gold and bronze medals respectively. Smith also set the world record with a time of 19.83 seconds, despite celebrating 10 meters before the finish line, as his victory was already very clear at that point. What makes this event the top story is not what the Americans did on the track, but more notably what they did on the podium following the race, as they received their medals at the podium. After donning their medals, the American sprinters wore a black glove on each hand, and during the national anthem, each raised their gloved hands with a closed fist, as seen in this photo, capturing the controversial moment. To discuss the significance of this event, we bring in special correspondent Andrew Medeiros, who was in the stadium for the race and medal ceremony. Now, Andrew, what did you make of it all?
Well, Pat, to be honest, I could hardly believe my eyes at first. Never before had we seen such a political statement made by American athletes at the Olympic Games. As a matter of fact, it's the first overtly political statement made at the Olympic Games since the Nazi salutes being allowed during Berlin 1936.
Fantastic point, Andrew. Obviously the context is far different though, right? What kind of statements were the pair trying to make?
Correct. Contextually, there is almost no similarity to the 1936 Games. I caught up with Tommy following their departure from the stadium and asked him about the actions that he and Carlos had just taken, and he had plenty to say on the matter. Smith stated that the protest was in support of African Americans and their struggle for equality back in the States. Obviously, this political statement was not meant kindly by the Olympic Committee. Both Smith and Carlos were sent home from the Olympic Village immediately, and reports from the men themselves say they received numerous death threats.
How awful to think that they had just won the country so much glory. How could they receive such hateful responses from Americans for using their platform for what they believe in? To me, that's one of the most American things you can do.
What makes this story even more interesting is that Tommy did not stop his explanation of the protests there. Tommy stressed the importance and significance of the actions of Peter Norman, the Australian silver medalist. According to Smith, not only was he aware and in support of the protest, he suggested to the pair that they don one glove each. When asked if he was okay with the idea of the protest, he replied confidently, stating, "I'll stand with you."
Sounds like a hell of an honest man. Not like your typical Aussie. The Commonwealth mustn't have liked his actions very much.
Most certainly not. He has since been publicly ridiculed by Australian press, and it is expected that he will never represent Australia internationally ever again. His actions didn't stop there though, as after finding out about the protests, Norman approached American rower Paul Hoffman, who is wearing an Olympic Project for Human Rights Badge, which is an organization that was formed to help combat racism worldwide. He asked if he could have it for the ceremony, and Hoffman is reported to have said, following the interaction, that if a white Australian is going to ask me for an Olympic Project for Human Rights Badge, then by God, he would have one. He then wore it for the medal ceremony alongside Smith and Carlos. Following the ceremony, when asked about the pin, Norman was quoted as saying, "I believe that every man is born equal and should be treated that way."
What a fantastic and brave man he is. Sounds like both Smith and Carlos appreciate his efforts greatly.
Most certainly, and I have to say, I was deeply moved by this demonstration. The bravery of all involved cannot be overstated, and the shots of the trio on the podium are going to become some of the most well-known photos in history.
I couldn't agree more. It is unfortunate that the reception for the two gentlemen won't be, and hasn't been, as positive as we make it out to be. The context that this protest is brought up in, following such a tumultuous year that has seen the assassination of both Robert F. Kennedy and Martin Luther King Jr., shows the resistance that this country still has to the idea of true equality for every man, regardless of skin color, creed, or origin. The importance of sports in unifying people of different races and backgrounds cannot be given proper recognition, and is part of what keeps us interested in sports every day. Thank you, Andrew, for your input, as always.
Anytime.
And here is where I would like to close out our broadcast with an important reminder. The power of sports, both as a competitive entity and a relationship builder, is indescribable. Teams become brotherhoods, regardless of skin color or creed. A man, or woman for that matter, is judged solely on their abilities athletically, rather than their predetermined differences or beliefs. Sports unify us as humans in our quest to be the greatest we can personally be. That is why we here at Yankeeland Sports Network stand with Tommy Smith and John Carlos in their fight for equality here in the United States of America. We at Yankeeland, like Peter Norman, believe that every man is born equal and should be treated that way. This is Patrick Corcoran signing off from Mexico City. Good night and see you next time.